I never thought this would happen to me. I always consider myself cautious, the kind of woman who notices the little details, who reads between the lines. My name is Laura, I'm 44, married to Mark for almost 20 years. By most accounts, we had a good marriage, comfortable, predictable, safe. He was a loving husband, a reliable father, a man who never gave me reason to doubt him, or so I thought. Lately, things had started to feel off. Not huge fights, not screaming matches, nothing obvious. Just small, subtle shifts. Mark came home later than usual a few times a week. His phone seemed glued to his hand, and I noticed him smiling at texts in a way I didn't recognize. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself I was being paranoid, that after all these years, some distance was normal. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that something was wrong. And that's where this story begins. The day I found the first real clue that everything I believed about my marriage might be a lie. It started with a simple mistake. Mark left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he went to shower. I don't know what compelled me. Maybe a nagging curiosity I couldn't shake, but I glanced at it. At first, I told myself it was innocent, checking an email, scrolling through work files. But then I saw it, messages. Hundreds of them, hidden in a folder he had thought I'd never find. The messages weren't just flirty. They were intimate, personal, the kind of words that belong to someone who isn't your spouse. Dates, plans, photos, proof that he had been living a double life for years. A second family. My heart stopped. My hands shook. I felt like the floor beneath me had vanished. I reread the messages over and over, hoping, wishing, that maybe I was misinterpreting them, that somehow there was a logical explanation. There wasn't. Every word confirmed the truth I didn't want to face. My husband, the man I trusted with my entire life, had been betraying me for 5 years. And just like that, the world I had built, the life I thought I knew, crumbled. I didn't sleep that night. I barely ate. The next morning, I waited for him to wake up, my hands trembling, my chest tight. When he came into the kitchen, smiling like everything was normal, I felt a surge of anger so intense I thought I might scream. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. He froze. His eyes darted away for a second, and I saw it, the flicker of guilt. I can explain," he started, and I felt bile rise in my throat. "It's not what you think." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Not what I think. Mark, I have all the messages, the photos, the plans. You have another family. For 5 years. He sagged into the chair, running a hand over his face. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I never wanted to hurt you. I got lost, and I thought I could balance everything, but his voice broke. I felt a mix of fury and disbelief. How could he talk to me like that, like it was some mistake, some accident? 5 years. 5 years of lies, of stolen nights and hidden calls. And now he wanted me to feel sorry for him? The confrontation lasted hours. He begged, explained, cried. I sat there, numb, feeling my trust dissolve like sand slipping through my fingers. Nothing he said could erase the betrayal, and yet, I still loved him, despite everything. After he left the kitchen that day, I collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling in ways I didn't know were possible. My mind was a storm, anger, grief, disbelief, humiliation, all mixing together in a nauseating swirl. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make the world feel as broken as I did inside. I kept replaying the messages in my head, the intimacy, the laughter, the plans he had made with her. How could he compartmentalize his life like that? How could the man I trusted completely, the father of my children, live a lie for half a decade? Sleep didn't come. I wandered the house, staring at the rooms we had shared for years, trying to imagine a life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over everything. I felt hollow, as if a part of me had been carved out. And yet, amidst the pain, there was confusion. I remembered the good moments, the laughter, the times he held me when I was scared, the years we had built together. Was it all real, or had I just been living an illusion? That question tormented me day and night. I realized then that betrayal isn't just an event, It's a sickness that seeps into every corner of your life. And for the first time, I questioned not just him, but myself, my judgment, my worth, my ability to love without being shattered. Days passed in a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I stopped pretending. I stopped smiling. Every little sound of him moving around the house made my stomach twist. I couldn't see him the same way, couldn't hear his voice without thinking of the lies, the secret life he had built while I thought we were happy. I realized I had a choice. I could crumble under this, let the betrayal define me, or I could fight for myself, whatever that meant. The thought of leaving him was terrifying. 20 years, children, shared memories, but the thought of staying, pretending it hadn't happened, was unbearable too. I didn't have an answer yet. I just knew that something had to change. I started keeping a journal, writing down every thought, every painful memory, every flicker of anger and sorrow. It was the only way I could begin to make sense of the chaos inside me. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of control. Not over him, not over his lies, but over me, over my response, my choices, my life. I couldn't undo what he had done, but I could decide what came next. The days that followed were surreal. Every routine moment felt heavy, charged with memories and suspicion. I couldn't look at our photos without feeling a stab of anger. I couldn't hear him laughing without imagining her voice alongside his. The house itself seemed tainted, a constant reminder that my life had been fractured in ways I couldn't yet repair. I started withdrawing, spending hours alone in our bedroom, staring out the window, letting the tears fall without shame. Friends called, worried, but I couldn't explain it. How could I? How could I tell anyone that the person I loved, trusted, and built a life with had been living a secret life for 5 years? I oscillated between rage and sadness. Sometimes I wanted to confront him again, to demand answers, to scream until the walls shook. Other times, I wanted to disappear, to vanish from a world that felt suddenly cruel and unfamiliar. And yet, even in that pain, a small spark of clarity began to grow. I realized that my life wasn't over. I realized that his betrayal, as devastating as it was, didn't define me. I could grieve, I could be angry, but ultimately, I had to decide who I wanted to be on the other side of this. Eventually, I knew I couldn't carry this alone. I reached out to my closest friend, Mia, a woman who had always seen me for who I truly was. I remember sitting in her kitchen, trembling, voice breaking, as I told her everything, every message, every lie, every hidden call. Mia didn't judge. She didn't try to sugarcoat it. She just listened. And in her listening, I found a small measure of relief. It felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath underwater for years. I also made an appointment with a therapist. Talking to a stranger about the betrayal felt terrifying at first, but slowly, I realized that my pain was valid, my anger was justified, and my feelings were not something I had to bury. Support didn't erase the hurt. It didn't make the betrayal disappear, but it reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my life didn't have to end because of someone else's lies. It reminded me that I could survive this, even if surviving meant facing days that felt impossibly heavy. Alone at night, I started replaying the years we'd shared, not just the recent ones, but the whole life we had built together. I asked myself, when did the cracks begin? Were there signs I ignored? Moments I brushed off? It hurt to admit that maybe I had turned a blind eye at times, excusing little lies or strange absences because I wanted to believe in the life we had. But it also reminded me that I had tried. I had loved fully, with everything I had. I began to understand that betrayal is never a reflection of your worth. It's not about what I lacked or failed to give. It's about choices the other person made. And while I couldn't control his choices, I could control mine. This reflection was painful, but necessary. I needed to separate myself from the life he had stolen in secret and reconnect with the woman I still was, strong, capable, and deserving of honesty and love. After weeks of confusion and heartache, I knew I had to protect myself. I couldn't continue living in a house where every word, every glance, carried the weight of betrayal. I needed boundaries, clear, firm, unyielding. I told Mark that I needed space. I needed time alone in our home to process everything. I stopped sharing details of my day. I stopped asking where he was going. I limited our conversations to logistics and necessities. It was cold, clinical even, but it was what I needed to survive. For the first time, I realized that self-respect isn't selfish. It isn't cruel. It's survival. By setting these boundaries, I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been buried under lies and deceit. And every day, as I kept them, I felt a small spark of strength return, a reminder that I still had agency over my life. After weeks of distance, I felt ready to face him again, not as the broken, desperate woman from the first confrontation, but as someone who had started to reclaim her power. I needed clarity, honesty, and closure, even if it was painful. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. I looked at him straight in the eyes. I need the full truth, Mark. No excuses, no hiding, no more lies. He hesitated, then spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I've made terrible mistakes. I never should have let it go this far. I love you, but I failed you in ways I can't undo. I listened, anger simmering beneath my skin, but I also noticed something else, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Yet, the pain of betrayal was still raw, and his words couldn't erase the years of deceit. I realized that hearing the truth didn't heal me immediately. It only reminded me why I needed to protect myself, why I needed to think carefully about the next steps in my life. I started small. I took long walks alone, feeling the world around me instead of being trapped in my own thoughts. I signed up for a yoga class, reconnected with old friends, and even started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. Each small step was a declaration. I was still here, still whole, still capable of joy. For the first time in months, I laughed. It was tentative at first, a fragile thing, but it grew stronger every day. I realized that reclaiming myself wasn't about forgetting him or forgiving him. It was about remembering who I was before all this pain and deciding I deserved to live fully again. Every time I looked in the mirror, I reminded myself, I am not defined by his lies. I am not broken beyond repair. I am still me, still capable of love, still worthy of truth and respect. Eventually, the question I had been avoiding became unavoidable. What now? Could I forgive him? Could we rebuild what was shattered? Or was our marriage beyond repair? I realized that the future was mine to shape. I could choose to stay and work through the pain, or I could choose to leave and create a life where honesty and respect weren't optional. Neither choice was easy. Both carried fear, uncertainty, and the weight of the past. I spent hours alone, thinking, journaling, and imagining my life in different scenarios. With each passing day, I felt a growing clarity. I needed a future where I could trust myself first, where I could look in the mirror without flinching, where my heart could breathe again. And though I didn't yet know exactly what that future would look like, I knew this. I would no longer let betrayal define me. I would decide my own path, on my own terms. Acceptance didn't come all at once. It wasn't a moment of sudden clarity, but a slow, quiet process. I still felt pain, anger, and betrayal, but they no longer controlled me. Instead of screaming at the walls or crying endlessly, I allowed myself to feel, to grieve, and then to let go, piece by piece. I forgave myself for doubting my instincts too late. I forgave myself for staying in a marriage that was already fractured, for believing in someone who didn't deserve that trust. And while I couldn't forgive him, not yet, maybe never completely, I learned to release the hold his actions had over my life. In acceptance, I found strength. I realized that even after the deepest wounds, life continues. I had survived the unimaginable, and that survival became my anchor. With acceptance came action. I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I spent more time with my children, deepening bonds that had been strained by years of hidden tension. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from, started exploring hobbies I had long abandoned, and even traveled alone for the first time in years. I set new boundaries with Mark. Our interactions became civil, respectful, and purposeful. I realized I didn't need closure from him to find my own peace. I didn't need his apologies to validate my worth. I was reclaiming my life, my joy, my independence. Each day felt lighter. Each choice I made reminded me that the future was mine, and mine alone. The betrayal had shattered a world I thought was unbreakable, but it also forced me to discover a strength I didn't know I had. Looking back, I realized that betrayal changes you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. It teaches you harsh lessons about trust, love, and your own strength. I learned that your worth is never defined by someone else's choices. I learned that it's okay to grieve, to be angry, and to take your time finding peace. Most importantly, I learned to listen to myself again, to honor my instincts, my needs, and my boundaries. Life is fragile, and love is precious, but self-respect is non-negotiable. To anyone out there facing the unimaginable pain of betrayal, it hurts. It cuts deep, but you will survive. You will rebuild. You will find your voice again, and in that voice is your power. Don't let someone else's lies dictate your life. Claim your truth, and let it guide you forward.